Welcome everyone to a short demonstration of setting up older SU carburettors. The more observant viewers will notice that these carbs are not connected to an engine, which means this won't be a fully comprehensive lesson. I have been asked to give a few tips, so I hope that this will still be useful. It is worth buying some carb cleaner spray. I also use this POR 15 metal cleaner to soak any parts that are covered in varnish deposit. Firstly, removing the dash pot. It needs to go back on the same way around, so it's usual to make a scratch mark. Note that the screws are different lengths to fit the space available. Be very careful when lifting the piston out. The metering needle is all too easy to bend, which renders it scrap. A new needle is required in such an event. In close-up we can see that there is a small shoulder at the top of the needle. Usually this should be flush with the piston. I've positioned this needle a little higher than normal because my carbs ran too weak at their richest setting. If your carbs run too rich on the weakest adjustment, then you can move the needles down slightly so that the shoulder protrudes. These carburettors don't have a manual choke, so the jets have an adjusting screw underneath for the mixture, covered by some dome caps. Okay, this one's seized on, so I'll leave it for now while I show you the jet assembly. As you can see, there's a big cork sealing washer. Berlin now produce a new design that incorporates suitable rubber seals to cope with modern fuels. The jet assembly itself has a long spring bearing against a brass cup washer and a cork seal. Installing the jet needs a certain procedure to be followed. Screw it in loosely, then refit the piston and dash pot. Now you need to centre the jet. Keep lifting the piston and letting it drop as you gently tighten the jet assembly. If the needle binds on the jet, unscrew it slightly until the needle goes in freely again, and then slowly tighten again. Eventually you can fully tighten it and the needle should not touch the jet at all. This process is crucial to having a happy set of well-behaved carbies. This piston is a bit sluggish as it's not been in use for some years. The dome cap is coming off this one okay. Here's the mixture adjusting screw. If you have carbs with a manual choke, then there will be an adjusting nut. Now to tackle the float chamber. This lid is stuck on. After spraying with carb cleaner, some gentle persuasion with a leather mallet. And there is the valve. The original valve was all metal. I installed this one back in 1990 and it is spring loaded. These valves can jam open when the bowl is empty. The new version was even more prone to jamming. There's an easy fix for that. I fitted some washers under the float to stop it from dropping too low when the chamber is empty. This is an important safety issue. The latest version of the valve has a Viton rubber seal. Whatever valve you have, you need to make sure that the float level is correctly adjusted. Here I've placed a 3/8 inch drill across the lid. The arch of the lever rests upon it. The valve should be gently but fully closed. If you have a different type of SU carburetor, you might need a different size drill, so please check the data for whatever carb you have, or Berlin might be able to help. If the setting is not right, you need to remove the lever and bend it near to the pivot. The floats are brass. If you can hear fuel sloshing around inside, you'll need a new one, unless you have the skill to repair it. These washers I added are the old washers from the jet. Putting the lid on, that tendency for the valve to jam open makes it more fiddly to fit. Be careful not to strip any threads, especially in the base of the chamber. Just tighten it up very gently. A quick look at the cold start device, officially known as an automatic enrichment carburetor. The metering needle has an adjustment on its stop. I usually find it best to fully screw it down for its weakest setting. Inlet vacuum pulls this needle down. This is the solenoid that actuates the device. Later versions had a more robust fixing down. Carb repair kits include some sealing washers for this device, but nothing much else. There's a screw at the bottom that might leak. I find that red fibre washers always leak a little bit of fuel, so I always use a liquid gasket sealant such as Hylamar Blue. As you can see, the throttle disc is held with two screws. The full repair kits for these carburettors include the brass spindle. I found that this took up all the noticeable wear. If the holes in the carb body are badly worn, then you might need to ream them out and fit bronze bushers. I can't demonstrate tuning just yet, but to balance the carb throttles you will need to slacken the clamps linking the adjacent spindles. Then adjust each throttle stop screw. The traditional way to judge each carb is to use a long tube with one end in your ear and the other end at the carb air intake, and listen to the hissing noise as the engine idles. This takes practice and skill. I found it much more accurate to use a vacuum gauge designed for this purpose, placing it over the air intakes, and adjust the throttle stops until they are all equal. To adjust the mixtures, lift the piston very slightly as the engine idles. Use something like a long screwdriver, noting that the engine might spit back. If the engine speed rises, it is too rich. If it slows, it is too weak. You might have noticed that in the dash pot there was no damper plunger. There is still damping because air is trapped, and when the piston rises, air is forced out through a tiny hole in the brass cap. Less damping is needed for carbs that don't feed several cylinders via a manifold. More modern SUs also have a spring inside the dash pot. For lubrication, on this early type with no plunger, you only need enough oil to cover the top of the piston and no more. Light SAE 20 oil. The later plunger type needs a bit more oil inside. The throttle spindles should also be oiled just occasionally. Most spare parts are available from Berlin, handmade, so they are not cheap. That's all for now. Hopefully in a few months' time I can show a full overhaul. Thanks for watching and see you soon.